I'm Astrid Lobo Gajiwala, and I have come from Mumbai, India. I'm one of the contributors in the book, which has been published by Catholic Women Speak, and I have come to participate in the symposium, which is being held. It's ongoing now at Rome. I'm basically a professional scientist, and if I were to identify myself as a woman, I would really see myself as a scientist. Okay, I've started India's first tissue bank 30 years ago, way ahead of anybody else in the country. So I have contributed very significantly in that regard, and currently I am also working for the Government of India as director of their regional organ transplant program. So that, I guess, would define me if somebody were to ask me who I am. However, I may also say that I also take my Catholic identity very seriously. And along with my job, I have always been very involved with the church at various levels. First of all, I guess as a very active parishioner. So I have done everything possible, lecture, sing in the choir. I have been president of the parish council. I've also been secretary of our archdiocesan pastoral council. And then I've worked on various national and international fora. So I have been also addressed the bishops' conferences. I have been resource persons for the Asian bishops. So these are all various ways in which I have been contributing to the church. And I must say that I don't think the church often realizes that when women contribute to the church, they are giving much more than just their expertise, because we juggle many lives. So in my particular case, it has been my professional life, but also my family. I'm a mother. I have 3 children. I'm a wife. And I have responsibilities at home and with my family. So for instance, I remember in 1992, I was invited by one of the bishops to address the bishops at their plenary assembly. And I was to talk on women's issues. And at that time, I already had a 2.5-year-old daughter. I was still breastfeeding my second daughter. And this meeting was in another city from where I was. So I had to travel there. So it meant quite a lot for me I had to take leave from my work. But I did this because I thought it was something that was really important. And as it turned out, it was a very important meeting, because at the end of that meeting, the bishops decided to institute a women's desk. This was the first time that something like that had been done in the Indian church. And this women's desk subsequently became the Women's Commission of the Catholic Church in India. And that commission has worked very well. It has networks right across the country, and it's doing a lot of good work. And we have brought out 2 excellent documents: the gender policy, which came out in 2010, and another policy, guidelines to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace, which came out in 2017. I was quite closely involved with the drafting of both those documents. So this is just to say that I never knew it would lead to this, okay? But at that moment, that was a call, and I accepted it. And like I said, we often give more than just our expertise, and I think this is something that needs to be recognized in the church. I must honestly say that one of the reasons why perhaps I have been able to contribute in the Indian church is that I'm not employed by the church. So whatever I do has been because I am committed to the teachings of Christ, and because I'm passionate about empowering women. And so I have made a very conscious decision that I would never be employed by the church and never be dependent on the church financially. The reason being, it gives me the freedom to to answer what I believe is the call of every baptized Catholic, to be prophetic. And so I sometimes feel that when you have to take a stand, which may not necessarily agree with the official stand of the church, it's much easier if you are not dependent on the church for your livelihood. And so this has been a very conscious decision in my life. The challenges for Indian women, I think, would be common for women across the world in the church. And one of these is obviously, where are the women in leadership positions in the church? Yes, the church has opened up its doors to women in consultative positions, but we are not sitting at the decision-making table, and we do not want to eat the food that is served to us. We want to be there setting that menu. So, I think it's important for women to be part of the decision-making. I also have a problem with, we talk of, we are the church, okay? But the moment you mention church, it's usually the bishops are synonymous with the church. Okay, we don't seem to be identified in the public eye as being church. Or our theology may say that, but what is the reality? And I think part of the reason is because we are never there when the decisions are made, and we are not part of the implementation process. We are just there for making recommendations, and we don't know what will happen to those recommendations. So I think that's one important aspect. The second thing is the whole question of servant leadership. For me, it's a big problem, because the question for me is, when you have a hierarchical system, how can you have servant leadership? Because to me, to have servant leadership, the structure needs to be more flat. So so those are two issues which I struggle with. And the other issue that I struggle with is consistently we have teachings of the church which are very progressive with regard to women, okay? And I can quote so many. But then you have something like the synod, which is happening in a few days here in Rome. And I understand that the rules have been changed so that religious brothers can vote, but the women will still not be able to vote. And in today's world, I just cannot understand how you can justify something like that. It's just mind-boggling. And for me, this is a big problem, because I have 3 children, 2 daughters, and they really, maybe I have a kind of an emotional link with the church, and I can also see the bigger picture, because I see so much that is good in the church, so much that has formed me as an individual. So I still would like to stay within the church, but as a critical voice. But for my daughters, they don't want to take the trouble. And sometimes I have no answers for the questions that they ask. So even something as simple as ordination of women, yes, we can use all the theological arguments possible, but in today's world, when every constitution talks about, is against gender discrimination, what kind of answers can I give them? So for me, this is a big problem. How do I keep my daughters within the church? I really am proud to be a Catholic. And I have a son who's the youngest, and at this moment, I think he is at a phase of questioning all religion. But even my son will admit that the Catholic Church has a lot going for it in terms of its social teachings. And for me, this is what sustains me, okay? So I look at the teachings of Christ, and for me, that's all I need. And I also look at the Catholic Church and some of its documents, its official teachings, which again, I find, I may not agree with all of them all the time, every way, but yes, there's a lot of good, and there's a lot of learning that I have got from it, and I truly appreciate that. And more than that, I think I meet wonderful people in the Catholic Church, people who are struggling just like me, and people who consider themselves church, both men and women, including priests, nuns, and even some bishops. I'm really happy to see that we all are struggling together, but we still love this church.